Hi, this is Andy. Doug is still away. Lake Como with George Clooney was the last that we heard. So I'm going to talk about the trade deadline and talk at greater length about baseball. And we'll start by saying something that Terry Collins said so often that it probably became physically painful. Get me Blevins.
It was physically painful for my arm, but great for my career. So a big thank you to TC.
That's true. It cuts both ways. How's the arm? Are you healed up now from like 2016 or whatever it was? Y'all better?
Yeah. I feel great now that this time off from retirement till now. Like, I'm like, oh my gosh, this is what people normally feel like with their body. Like, I don't hurt. I don't have aches and pains as often as I used to. But like I said, we were talking about a little bit before going on air. This is what you sign up for when you join baseball.
That's for sure. Trade rumors for me and pain for you.
We love it.
This is Shea Anything. Jerry's so excited to talk to me that we're going to cheat Verizon out of their read. And Jerry might know this by now, but I've become so much better at Doug than doing these professional reads. I can do them fast. I can do them slow. I can do them dramatic. I can remind you to subscribe to Shea Anything at Apple Podcast, Spotify, or whatever you get your podcasts. And most importantly, I can tell you that Shea Anything is now brought to you by Verizon. That's 5G, built right for the Mets, from the network that more people rely on, and it's only on Verizon. How was that? Faster next time, Jerry, or like? What do you think?
I found that 5 is the correct number of G's that you need. So you nailed it to me.
So if they ever came out with 6G, it wouldn't be right for the Mets. You would know. You've been a Met very recently. You know that 5G was built right for the Mets, and 6 would be too
yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, for this iteration of Mets, 5Gs is the perfect amount.
So we're obviously recording this in trade deadline week. There's almost no question that this will be dated in some form or fashion by the time it's released, by the time you people out there listen to it. So what Jerry and I are going to do is talk a little big picture, do something a little evergreen that's about the trading season, but not necessarily reliant on Mets news. We have the privilege of having you here as a former player, Jerry, a guy who's been traded. You've been on the prospect side of a trade. The Cubs drafted you in 2004. You're with that organization. They develop you. Some guys talk about how it can be a little bit traumatic or disorienting to be traded by the team that drafted and started to develop you. 07, you're still a prospect. You go to Oakland in the Jason Kendall trade. What was your experience of that? That was pre-Twitter, so maybe you actually got to hear it from the team and not read it online, or what? Like, how did that go down, and how did it feel? Was it like the kind of rejection that some guys talk about?
It's definitely a whirlwind of emotions. We actually had an off day. I was playing with the Tennessee Smokies, the AA team at the time, the Cubs affiliate. I have no idea where it is now, probably still. But we had an off day, did some golfing in the morning. We come back to our apartment with like 15 guys that live in a 2-bedroom apartment to pay for minor league, living arrangements. And we're sitting there and we're watching ESPN, and all of a sudden on the ticker, the bottom line, Cubs trade Cubs trade Jason Kendall. And I'm like, right. Oh, that's exciting. He's a great player. And it says for catcher Rob Bowen and minor league pitcher Jerry Blevins. I'm like, wait, what? And then I had to wait the 5 minutes for the ticker to come back. And I was like, oh my God, I got traded. So I found out on the bottom line ticker on ESPN. I never heard from the Cubs or the A's or my agent at the time. Like, it was just pure chaos. I'm looking around at my teammates that spent the off day with me. I'm like, what do I do? Do I pack? And they're like, I don't know. And so I literally just went to the field, collected my stuff, and just waited for a phone call for somebody to tell me what to do. So it was scary because, like you said, the Cubs are the only team that I have ever known. I played against the A's coming up in the minor league affiliates, but I didn't know anything about it. So I got traded over there. I feel weird. I'm excited, but I'm also nervous. Like the first day of school, sure. When you show up to a new clubhouse. So I got traded over. It was great for my career. But those 3 days, and especially that first day, is just like pure adrenaline, fear, and just tell me what to do, tell me where to go, I'll do it, and then baseball will take care of itself.
That's interesting, because even though Twitter didn't exist yet, you basically did find out that the ESPN crawl was the pre-Twitter way, and you couldn't even wait for like 5 other reporters to tweet it or confirm it or deny it. Like you said, you had to wait for the crawl to come all the way back around. Did you know what was the state of trade rumors as a prospect back in 2007? Like, was your name out there, or was it a complete shock?
Complete shock. My name wasn't really out there. I had basically just kind of come into my own form. The 2006 season was like a wash for me. The Cubs dropped me down submarine and tried me in a different way, and it just didn't work for me. So at the end of the year, I switched back over the top. I ended up in AA, playing 3 months in Columbia during winter ball, and then just started to really pitch well in 07. And I was just focused on how to continue being, the best version of myself. And so when I got traded, I was like, does that mean that the Cubs hate me and they don't think I'm any good? And when I heard from the A's, they calmed me down. They're like, look, we really think you're going to be able to contribute at the big league level. We wanted you. And so it went from a feeling of rejection to a feeling of this team really wanted me. And I'll forever be grateful to the Cubs for drafting me, but more for the A's for really, they gave me that opportunity. They went out and traded some capital for me and really started my career. And so I love the A's for that.
That's an interesting line of rejection versus being wanted. I guess it's a little bit of both.
Yeah, it was like when I was leaving the Cubs, leaving my apartment, it felt like I got released, like that feeling of just, all right, bye everybody else. It's that I created this core of relationship with. You guys are going to continue to play baseball without me. And then when I got over there, everybody was like, come on, we need you. Let's go. You're pitching. Actually the first game I ever threw in, Anthony Recker in AA was my catcher in Corpus Christi.
Oh, really? Wow.
Yeah. That? So he was my first ever interaction with the Oakland A's was throwing to our beloved Anthony Recker.
Did you guys say to each other that year, hey, one day when there's a global pandemic, let's do a local TV show together on Zoom? Did that come up?
He had said something along those lines, but I was too ignorant to understand what he meant. I guess, Recker's always, he's light years ahead of everybody. So
true. He's on a wavelength, that's for sure. What now on the other side of you've been on good teams that have made trades. You've been the veteran player with teams that are either looking to add, or I don't know if you've been on a team where the clubhouse wanted you to add and maybe the front office didn't do it. But so flip this equation now, if you don't mind, and tell us about what it's like to be an established player watching now Twitter probably by that point and wondering what's going on, and what's it like when a move actually does happen. I imagine it's encouraging when the front office helps your roster.
Absolutely. Like when your team is committed, everybody, when you get to spring training, your whole organization is like, we're going to win the World Series. This is our goal. We're all going to win. And then once games start, the players still believe, the coaching staff still believes, the fans, still believe for the most part, as long as you're putting together something. But you never really know what the front office is thinking because there's that separation. They have to keep the distance between on field and business. And so when you're playing well and you're, whether it's injuries or just a lack of productivity from a certain aspect, a certain position, and a team, your front office goes and gets somebody to fill in that hole or that need or that want for your team, it actually pushes you to another level because you, again, get that renewed sense of an organization that really does want to win. It's not worrying about the future. We're not thinking about, 2 years from now. What we're really doing is trying to win now. And that lights a fire under the guys, a renewed sense of purpose on this season. And it really brings everybody back into focus, and you welcome whoever it is into that fold and let them know that, hey, you're going to be a part of this. We're a special team. We're making a push. You're the last piece that we needed, and you're going to be an integral part. And with the leadership that the Mets have and the guys that they like, Rich Hill, like he knows he's been a part of it. He's been around. this team is going to be like, hey, we need you. Let's run. And it's like that spring training feeling all over again.
Yeah. I was talking to Rich Hill on the field yesterday, actually, and he was saying that he's like, I'm telling these guys, like, let's focus on winning the World Series. I've been through it. We can do it, so you can imagine how that would help. What are some of the guys, whether it was Oakland, Washington, New York, or anything else, what were some of the guys that you remember coming in and making a big difference, not just on the field, but in the clubhouse that way? You have anything that stick out?
Yeah, absolutely. Yoenis Cespedes in 15, that surge, that feeling, there's a little bit of, that was the Wilmer Flores, crying on the field because he's leaving. That's that feeling of rejection, because that this is a good team that has something special. He's played his whole career there. He felt like he was being brushed aside. He was worried about it. And then to bring in a guy like Yoenis Cespedes, and it's just, you just felt it in the clubhouse where you're like, all right, this team wants to win. They bring in a guy like this. They let go of some really good prospects. They want to win. And he really helped carry that team. And, those are the big things. I remember trading for Addison Reed. It was like
big. That was
one of those.
One.
That was a big one, right? He was a guy that nobody really, he was with Arizona and he was kind of up and down, but we knew what he was capable of, or, the front office. And he came over and he really solidified that bullpen. He was able to carry it. We traded for Clipper that year. Like, it was just beautiful. Guys come in, fill a role. Most guys come in super humble, just be like, look, what do you need me to do? You got me for a reason. Let me do my job. Let me do what you need me to do. And you fit in perfectly into a team.
That Wilmer Flores night brings back so many memories in so many different ways for so many people. Did you know, I was actually reminded of this today, because something we're planning for baseball night in New York. I was always told that someone showed him my tweet in the on deck circle from the front row, and that's what made him cry. So I bear the responsibility for that. So I was told in the middle of the game, correctly, was that they had agreed to a trade pending medicals for Flores and Wheeler for Gomez. And by the way, doesn't that just underscore how some of this is skill and some of this is luck? You guys are probably not in the World Series if that trade goes through. Sandy Alderson knows what he's doing, but he agreed to that trade. And then Cespedes fell in their lap. It's just, sometimes you're good and sometimes you're lucky.
This is the Wilmer Flores anniversary day.
What's your memory of that whole thing, Jerry?
So I was hurt. I was in Port St. Lucie watching the game, right. Pushing the guys on. That's Wilmer. There's a reason why the Mets fans loved him and still continue to love him. It's because he is a human being and he's not afraid to show it. Being vulnerable like that on national TV, international TV, that stuff is seen. And that just shows you a love for an organization, a love for a fan base, a love for the teammates that you're with. It's just one of those peeks behind the curtain, and you realize that your favorite ball players are also human beings and they have real emotions. And sometimes that spills out to being on camera, and it's not always pretty. Sometimes you ugly cry on TV, and fans will forever be endeared to you for that reason.
Yeah, man, that night was, you're right. You saw the real Wilmer Flores and you saw the real Terry Collins and real Sandy Alderson too. It was a funny whole thing, because I remember you've probably seen this video, or maybe even watching the post game that night, but Terry's all fired up because David Wright had come to him in the middle of the game, like, you got to take Wilmer out of the game. He's upset. He's like, what? And then he recounts, like, traded who for what? It was like screaming at they told me Wilmer's traded. So he's all mad. And then the media leaves his press conference, and Sandy's standing in that like kind of area behind the indoor cage, and he's just pissed at the guy. He's like, there is no trade. There will not be a trade. So it's like, what? So I had to call the office and say, cancel the back page. There's no trade anymore. And then we had to figure out why. And that night ended up, there's a problem. Oh, also peak Scott Boras. And then we'll move on, because there was a problem with Gomez's hips, which is in the medicals, which is why the trade got banged. And I had a toddler at the time and lived in a little apartment in Brooklyn. And it was like 1:30 in the morning, and Boras is screaming, like, and I'm trying to like turn the volume down on my phone because we were reporting that his client's hips were injured. Anyway, that's trade deadline season for you. Jerry, you just got to go to Tudo Fresco and take the whole thing in down in St. Lucie, I guess.
That's it. I spent some time there just watching the game, sipping some vino.
Well, you're listening to the Shea Anything Podcast, brought to you by Verizon. We are now confirmed through a source with direct knowledge that 5G is built right for the Mets from the network that more people rely on. That's only on Verizon. Jerry, do you have a rain delay recommendation for me? I haven't done one of these for you yet. A movie or show?
Man, I do. I had another movie picked last week. I picked a movie, and it's a comedy, and maybe I'll save it for later. But earlier this week, I was sitting down here at my desk, and I just put on some TV in the background, and I made the mistake of putting on Godfather Part 2 to try to work at the same time, and I was just drawn in, and I just This is a rain delay recommendation for a day in Atlanta when a storm rolls in and you're down for 4 hours, right? So this is a 3.5 hour runtime, depending on the 50 different variations of the movie that you're going to watch. But Godfather Part 2, to me, it's movie perfection. It's Francis Ford Coppola at his best. Best Oscar winner that year, I think it was 75. Robert De Niro, Best Supporting Actor Oscar winner. Doesn't even speak a word of English in the whole movie, wins Best Oscar. Al Pacino loses the Best Actor Oscar, maybe the single greatest performance in cinema history, I think. There's so much subtlety to his performance, so much just, facial expression. Robert Duvall at his peak, like it's just a beautiful film. So many different things. Every time you've watched, I've had to have seen it 25 times now, and you pick up little things here and there every time you see it. And so my rain delay recommendation for today is The Godfather Part 2.
Boy, that's good. And then you're right. As much as that's like an obvious one, you're right about the way you describe it, because it is a really gift that keeps on giving. That scene, talk about De Niro's performance where he doesn't speak a word, when he's walking on the rooftops and hiding the pieces of the gun, and then they fade back into the present day with Pacino. It's just incredible. It gets you every time. And then, the structure, the whole thing. You're absolutely right. That's a good call. It
is an obvious one, but again, like when you put it on and sit down and give it some thought, you can't help but be wowed by, making movies is an art, and this is that art at its peak, whether it's, if you're a fan of paintings and it's the Mona Lisa, or whatever the case may be. This is filmmaking at its peak for me.
Yes, that's a good way to put it. No Sudden Move, by the way, if you're looking for a new one. If you haven't seen that, it's a new Steven Soderbergh with Don Cheadle and Benicio del Toro and some other people. It's the first new movie I've seen in a while that I like. All the creative energy goes into shows now in limited series, but this is
that a heist movie?
Yeah, just a really solid.
Bring the reverse recommendations. I'm all for that.
So I'm
a huge Soderbergh fan.
Yeah. 3-batter rule time. Let me ask you if you're worried about Jacob Degrom, and then we'll talk about that, because this is kind of a area of simmering anxiety for a team trying to win the World Series. What are your thoughts? Now, understanding that you're not there, and
So this is a two-parter, right? So am I worried about Jacob Degrom? The number one overriding answer is yes. I'm worried for the same reason if I were a Bulls fan in the 90s, if Michael Jordan was any bit of hurt, if he had a clipped toenail, even if he's healthy, I'm worried that he's going to go down. He's the heart and soul. He's the best player on the planet. He is single-handedly head and shoulders above everybody else. If there's a game 7 of the World Series and you don't have him, you're going to feel less great about it. So am I worried since he's hurt and has kind of been dealing with things? Absolutely. On the other hand, I know this medical staff, I know the front office, and I've seen Jake develop to the person and player that he is today. So I'm not worried that I know that he's doing, and the medical staff is doing every single thing that they can to make him ready to go. And so I am worried because he's the best pitcher on the planet, but I'm not worried in the sense that I know that they're doing everything they can the right way to make sure that he gets on the field.
DeGrom aside, generally, Jerry, as a pitcher, do you do what I do when you see a guy throwing 101 and then with a slider at like 92? Do you go, is he going to break? I mean, does that style worry you generally of just high velocity, high spin? Is it not sustainable?
No, it is sustainable. And if you watch Jake throw. It's not, it's not violent.
It's a pretty easy 101. Yeah. Yeah.
I can't, like, it's beautiful what he does. It's timing, it's torque and tension and release. It's beautiful. It's poetry in motion. For everything that the Griffey swing was to swings, I think DeGrom's delivery is the same thing on that. I think it is sustainable. He's built for it. Your body's not necessarily built to throw a baseball in general, but we've learned how to train for it. And so I'm not worried about him as a person and as medical staff of doing things necessary, but I am worried as a Mets fan, as a fan of this team, that, we need him and he's the best player on the planet. Of course you're going to want him.
So Jeff wants me to ask you about your stance on the universal DH, but he built his bias, I think, into the question, the way it's worded on the rundown, which is, I'll read it verbatim. With Degrom and Walker seeming to hurt themselves this year on swings, Robert Stock pulls a hammy running to first. It's time for the universal DH. So in there is the argument for the universal DH. So it's kind of a loaded question, but where are you on that? Are you like pitchers get hurt to hitting they shouldn't hit?
So I'm torn. Not my oblique, which it would be if I took a swing right now, but I'm torn.
I'm torn, literally.
But I'm torn because I am a fan of National League style baseball. I love DH. I love the double switches. But it's inevitable. The universal DH needs to happen. There's no reason for Taijuan Walker, Jacob Degrom, Max Scherzer trying to bunt, gets hit in the face, breaks his nose, whatever the case may be. It's time to let it go. Everything evolves. The NFL changed the extra point. They moved it back because the games evolved. They change everything. They stopped doing kickoffs to where teams get returning it. The game evolves, right? The DH needs to come in. We don't need to lose Jacob Degrom pitching because he's fun to watch hitting. Like, it's just as simple as that. It's not worth it for the fans, for the teams, for the player. It's just simply, without Jake pitching, the game of baseball is less. It's lesser than. It's a proven fact. Without the best player, and if you get hurt doing something secondary, or maybe even like further down the line as hitting, so be it. It's time for the universal DH to come in. It should have been in this year. Between the bargaining, because player safety, it should have been in right away. You're seeing some of the things that are happening. Unfortunately, it was used as a negotiating piece, but it's coming. It's coming. There's going to be some give or take in this bargaining session coming up, but you'll see it in the future. Yeah,
I believe MLB took it out of the union, submitted it as part of the health and safety protocols, and MLB saw it as a bargaining chip, an economic issue. That's right. I mean, I hear you on the pitchers getting hurt. It's inevitable that that's a thing. But is that really – I know we're hearing about it a lot right now, and I know Jeff just put 10 examples in his biased question. But, like, is this – the pitchers have been hitting – I don't mean to be that guy, but pitchers have been hitting since, like, the Civil War. Is this really something that we are now saying that because pitchers hit, all these guys are getting hurt and they're not pitching? I understand that DeGrom hurt himself on swings. But is it really that risky for you guys to swing a bat?
It really is. We don't practice it enough. Okay. We don't do it. We don't train ourselves enough because, we're not that good at it. It doesn't matter. Anything you do on the offensive side is a bonus. Pitchers need to bunt. That's it. If you know how to bunt, then go from there. If you want them to bunt every time, then you're going to have guys like Anthony Rizzo playing right there, ready to field bunts and turn double plays. It's just simply an antiquated aspect of the game. Too many guys have specialized so early in their career that they never pick up a bat until they get to AA or now the big leagues and try to hit. And it's just simply like, it's out of the game. Like there's some pitchers now in today's world in high school that don't hit. You have a DH for your best player. Like, these guys would probably be the best hitter on their teams, but because they're so valuable as a pitcher that they stop doing it, as a 16-year-old, and you're asking a 33-year-old to do it. Like, it's time for it to go. I'm sad to see it go. I understand your frustration. I love that aspect of it, but it's time.
Well, you are a pitcher, so I cannot argue with you about the physical aspect of what that does. And you make great points. I'll just miss, like, there was a game, there's many games like this, but there was a game a couple months ago. The Mets are playing the Orioles, and Louis Rojas and Brandon Hyde are going back and forth on who to pinch hit for and who to put out on deck. And, they're playing they were playing in New York. So it was under National League rules. And it's like, I think John Means was pitching a gem, but it was a close game. So was Hyde going to pinch hit for him? And there's an intellectual managerial challenge there that I know we're both agreeing will be missed. So
to me, that's the biggest point that you're missing. As entertaining as Bartolo Colon's home run was, as watching Jake rake, it's amazing. It's the managerial, chess master moving pieces. I didn't like the 3-batter minimum rule for that purpose, because it takes an advantage away from a guy making moves. It takes them, some moves from a manager's ability to impact the game. And this is just one more thing that's removed, but this is for player safety. This really is a safety issue for me. I will miss it, but it will be, it'll go, it could be retired next to Loogie's. It'll be the DH. I'm sure this will take a bigger plaque in Cooperstown.
Well, I will temper my anger about this as the months go on, as it gets closer, because I'm listening to what you're saying about the safety, and that is first and foremost. The Loogie thing brings me to the last of the 3-batter rule that I wanted to ask you about. And this question was one that I had a chance, knowing that I was hosting with you today, I wanted to ask you specifically, because your position uniquely, where you are obviously a reliever, straddling the areas of where relievers are traditionally used, meaning guys were assigned innings and then matchups like yourself, right? So it's pretty much, and then the closer, set up guy, closer, blah, blah, blah. Now, increasingly, you have the lanes that the Yankees call them lanes. Some organizations might call them different things, but you know what I'm talking about? Like this is the area of the lineup and the particular situation that might apply to you. So be ready when these few guys come up in the 5th inning and the 7th inning and the 8th inning, what have you. So I'm wondering how different that is. I know years ago, pitchers just used to say, I want to know on the 6th inning guy, I want to know on the 7th inning guy. They can't really ask for that anymore. Obviously, that ship has sailed. But how different is it? And is it more challenging? Or is it just as simple as the manager tells you what the new deal thing is and you prepare for that? How's that change been?
So it's definitely more difficult from a player standpoint, from a bullpen guy, to not know exactly when, like from a timing issue. You pitch the 7th, that's easy. You can get a routine built up for your prep work to go into the 7th inning. You look at who's coming up and worry about scouting report as it's coming. But for the most part, timing is easy. When it's kind of based upon leverage or, plus or minus a certain amount of runs, that's when it becomes difficult to figure out when to ramp up and when to slow it down. And it's just a trial and error thing. Eventually you figure it out. You start to feel it. Like for me, it was pretty easy to know part of the lineup, because I'm going to face the lefties in the heart of the order, depending on the score, +1, +2, +3, or -1. Those are usually the ranges of the game. And it could be from the 5th inning through the 9th inning. And so I learned to, if you put it into a car, I learned to, warm my engine up from the 4th inning and kind of get it ready and I could hammer it down and get to fully ready quicker. And so that's it. It's just it's different, but guys are adjusted to it. You're seeing real professionals with an understanding of what they're being asked from their bosses, how to do their job. And you're seeing guys adjust, like Loop, like Familia. They come in any situation of the game ready to go. And that is difficult to do. And I think it's kind of understated the jobs that they've done in the bullpen to this point. They've been huge for the team.
Sure.
They get huge outs in so many different innings. It's not as easy as just going out. I'm the setup guy. I'm going to throw the 8th inning when we're in a save situation. It's much more difficult. You're always going to face the best hitters, and it's always going to be a high leverage situation. And it turns your normal season of what's my ERA, and it turns it into pass fail, which is tough. And that's kind of what I did. You either do your job or you don't. 100% results based. And there's a reason, because they're your best relievers in those situations. And that's what their job is now.
One of the things, Adam Ottavino, right after he signed with the Yankees, told me that one of the things that made this easier, these new roles easier, frankly, was that relievers were starting to get compensated for things other than saves and holds. Do you think that's just because he signed with the Yankees and they had a lot of money, or do you think that's becoming more of an industry-wide thing, even when you get into arbitration and stuff? Like, this is getting in the weeds a little, but clearly should be important to a worker to be paid for their contribution. Is that still something that can cause some concern among relievers? Like, you're using me in an important high leverage spot, but is this really something that's valued, or is that starting to catch up, you think?
I think it's starting to catch up. Like, Ottavino knows that he was compensated not for saves, but because of what he's capable of doing. I think teams are willing to spend more on guys that pitch in those high leverage situations. They're not trying to everybody knows everything now as far as what you're capable of doing or what you've been doing. There's no more, buying low on a guy that's, pitching the fifth inning, that all of a sudden you're going to pay him, undervalue. They know what you're capable of doing. There's no sneaking around high leverage situations anymore. Everybody understands that the game is on the line in the fifth inning, maybe even more so than it is in the ninth inning, depending on situation. And so teams value the player more than just about their stats. They understand what they're capable of doing. If that answered any bit of that.
It did. That answered it perfectly. A reminder to subscribe to Shea Anything, an Apple Podcast, Spotify, wherever you get your podcast. And a reminder that the Shea Anything Podcast is brought to you by Verizon. It's 5G built right for the Mets from the network more people rely on. Only Verizon. Truly a privilege to be sponsored by Verizon. And I hope you listen to that whole promo because they paid for it. Jerry, thank you for joining me. This is fascinating. You and we missed each other I wasn't a beat writer anymore when you were around. So it's nice to be able to have some time to sit and chill and pick your brain a little, talk to you about stuff.
Hey,
so,
did you ever write anything bad about me? I just, man to man, I just want to know.
No.
Were you ever overly critical?
What would there have been to be critical about? I wrote, it was a shame that time you fell off the sidewalk or whatever it was, but I didn't blame you for it.
Yeah. Thanks. Those things happen.
No, you were a big part of the team when I was covering as a columnist, and
I just asked because you made you revealed that it was you that made Wilmer Flores cry. Like I did. You were the guy.
It was the price.
And you seem to have a little bit of pride about that. I'm not gonna lie.
I do, because I broke the story. And in my sick,
you broke the non-story. You broke the non-story.
Well, no, what I reported, and thank God, at the time was that they had agreed to the trade and it was pending the medical review. And then obviously the medical review fell through. There were some others who got ahead of their skis a little bit and just reported that it was a done deal.
That's why the players are always the last to know, because it isn't official until they tell you that you've been traded. And
that's a weird thing when you guys don't know. We know more. Like, I knew more last night about the Gallo trade than the players did at a certain point. And that's not really fair to you guys. It's a human beings. And that's where accuracy is really important, obviously, and not valued enough, in my opinion. Like, there was a report last night that Clark Schmidt, the pitching prospect, was going to the Rangers. He was never discussed in the deal. So the guy who put that out there could be like, oops, sorry. But Clark Schmidt's probably packing or something by that point. Oh no, So
it creates, and everybody's about the scoop being first instead of being accurate. And so, as a player, we're going to be last to know anyway. Well, it's part of the deal. But when it comes out and it's not actually happened, that's when it's tough. When whatever the pending medicals is a way to report it accurately, and then also revealing that a guy doesn't clear medicals is an issue for me too, as a HIPAA violation. And that's why Scott Boras is doing a Scott Boras thing, because you got to protect a guy's medical records. It's there's a fine line between a human being and an asset.
No question. That's a whole other conversation.
Oh, quick one. I wanted to add one last thing about being traded. Rich Hill was on the Cubs that year in 2007. He was like fully established as one of the best 3 starters there. I think they had Zambrano was the number 1, Ted Lilly the number 2, and then Rich Hill was the guy right behind him with that beautiful curveball that's still to this day dominating hitters. And I just wanted to give that a shout out.
That is interesting. So Jerry, thank you very much for joining us. Fascinating conversation, and we'll talk to you again soon.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me on.